In the last chapter we saw, despite his predicament, he resolves to see it through to the end. Violet then addresses Raoul, proposing that they thoroughly go through the details from the beginning until they find a solution or one of them gives in due to exhaustion. The scene shifts to the other side, where we see Violet's body. Yes, I am saying body here because the soul of the original Winter has now shifted to Violet's body. She rings the bell to inform the maids of her intention to call them. One of the maids questions why Mrs. Winter is calling them and suggests that they ignore it, believing that she may pretend to be ill again. Violet becomes frustrated as nobody responds, and her headache worsens. She urgently calls for Dr. Rickman. Rickman, exasperated, asks what the matter is, and Violet complains of a pounding headache, asking him to quickly diagnose her. Rickman examines her and insists that there is nothing wrong with her, just as he had previously mentioned. Violet protests, stating that her body feels awful. An argument ensues, with Rickman expressing frustration over her persistent complaints. Rickman warns her about her behavior, mentioning that she may be a princess but is going too far. However, Violet, still angry, informs him that she has to sign a contract with the person from Vitolin and demands proper treatment. After opening her locker and taking out some money, Violet angrily confronts Dr. Rickman, handing in the money and demanding to know what he can do to treat her. Rickman, taken aback, promises to find a way to treat her. Violet warned him that she needed to get to the capital quickly and that if her body fainted on the way, her husband would hold him responsible. Violet reflected in her mind that whenever she regained control of her own body, Rickman would face penalties anyway. Suddenly, an attendant noticed what was happening and asked about Violet's well-being. Violet rejected the concern and wanted coffee. Violet sipped her steaming hot coffee as soon as the servant brought it to her. Philip notices Violet's choices have come to resemble those of Winter's. Violet, irritated, asked how long he planned to stand there and told him to find out how Rickman wanted to treat her. She also asked Philip to acquire her a train ticket to the capital as soon as possible. Philip agreed and told her that he would take care of it. Violet, alone in her chamber, thinks how he used to thought Violet had been reared as refined royalty, but now understood her upbringing was no different from his own. He concluded that she had clearly occupied Violet's body. On the other hand, Winter seemed unmoved by the situation, recalling other incident when he had been captured and enslaved by dwarves, as well as being abducted for testing by a witch. Despite these happenings, Winter remained unmoved. He also stated that it wasn't simply one or two people who had problems against them. Violet expressed her joy to Winter, who was visiting for a few days, and remarked that they would be able to have lunch together. Winter, on the other hand, answered arrogantly, questioning why Violet was thrilled and disregarding the significance of their presence. Violet wondered if her hair had grown too long and if she should consider chopping it to change her image. Winter answered indifferently, noting that it was her decision and didn't bother him. Violet appeared to be bothered by Winter's actions. Winter then announced their departure, and in the present, Winter reflected on the episode, unclear if Violet changed her mind about cutting her hair, but noting that she didn't. Violet's insignificant questions to Winter stopped after that day. An attendant appeared and informed Winter, who was now in Violet's body, that she had delivered the recommended prescription from Dr. Rickman and that the conveyance to the train station would depart in the evening. Violet dismissed the maid and pondered why her prior answer had bothered her. The more she thought about it, the less it made sense. Violet, who was currently inhabiting Winter's body, was asleep when Hale entered and greeted Winter. Winter awoke and asked as to when they had fallen asleep. Hale urged Winter to rest for a longer period of time because she had worked so hard the previous day. Roll was startled that Winter, who was well-versed in cigar etiquette, had requested 10 bottles of wine for a protracted chat. Winter thought of detaining someone for 47 hours and feeling good when the person was released. They were pleased with living in deception since they believed that their regal upbringing had surprisingly helped them in this situation. Winter was informed by Hale that Violet had chopped her hair and that she should praise her on it. Violet, who was still inside Winter's body, seemed surprised. Hale remarked on Violet's well-being and asked as to why she was reluctant to spend time with the rest of the family. Winter disregarded the concern. Violet recalled how Winter never attended events with her because she was too preoccupied with work, oblivious to the glances and judgments she received. Winter, she believed, blamed her for his misery and didn't care about her. Meanwhile, a voice from beyond the door informed Winter that Violet had come. Hale was taken aback and had no idea why Violet was there. An attendant tried to stop Violet from entering, but she persevered and stated her unwillingness for Winter to enter. Violet urged everyone to leave and proposed a talk between herself and Winter. Servant Philip saw Hale's whereabouts and yelled, "I found him!" Hale asked about Philip's haste, reflecting on his rough demeanor. Philip, exhausted, asked if Mrs. Violet had arrived safely, reflecting on her haste in disembarking from the carriage. In a flashback, Philip attempted to stop Mrs. Violet, expressing concern for her well-being due to her weak constitution. He yelled at her, underlining the urgency. Returning to the present, Hale and Philip were having a talk. Hale thanked Philip for his support to Mrs. Blooming during her journey and asked about Mrs. Violet's whereabouts in the corridor. Meanwhile, Hale was puzzled by Mrs. Violet's quick change of demeanor, given her generally submissive nature. Winter approached Violet in her body, acknowledging their body switch and demanding an explanation for the strange incident. Winter professed ignorance, but Violet questioned the possibility of any other explanation. Winter admits to being puzzled as well. Violet expressed concern over the presence of a wine container and the foul odor of cigars. Winter, clutching Violet's beard, wanted to know what had happened to his body. However, as they got closer, they both collapsed on the ground. Violet surmised that their bodies had swapped back when they made touch. Winter noted that it was something along those lines. Violet recognized she was back in her own body, dismissing the illusion of delusion or a tumultuous dream. She considered returning to her prior existence, facing the icy and accusing glances she had attempted to avoid. Frustrated, she addressed Winter, pleading with him to pay attention and finish their talk, aware that no one would listen to her insignificant emotions. Violet urged Winter to continue the talk. Winter, still perplexed, admitted his lack of comprehension of the situation. Violet, reflecting on Winter's fixation on money, questioned his indifference even under such circumstances. She was disappointed in herself for anticipating a regular chat with him. Winter, intrigued by the successful discussion, wondered how Violet managed to avoid Roel. He admitted that Roel was not an easy opponent. Violet pondered Winter's comments, doubting his intentions and reminding herself not to expect anything from him. She couldn't help but wonder whether Winter was finally seeing her true self. She considered the possibilities, but tried to remain practical, not allowing her hopes to swell. Violet, changing the discussion, stated that the deal wasn't too difficult. She then asked as to why Winter believed they had switched bodies. Winter, doubtful of the response, claimed that he couldn't tell. Violet, engrossed in her own thoughts, considered the idea of Winter finally attending to her experiences. She quickly understood, though, that abruptly changing the subject might make the conversation uncomfortable. Instead, she chose to return to their current topic. Violet thought about the immigrant Kanak population, who were noted for their gray eyes and rumored supernatural talents, as she observed Winter's gray eyes. Winter, as a descendant of immigrants, she reasoned, may have some insight into their odd situation. However, Winter was enraged when Violet implied that the event was due to his poor upbringing. Violet, taken aback, stressed that it wasn't her aim and voiced her frustration that Winter assumed she was discriminating against her. She stated that such incidents had never occurred in her family previously. Violet wept, frustrated and disappointed because all she wanted was to have a meaningful talk with Winter. Winter pondered Violet's reaction, thinking to himself that he wasn't driving her away and didn't understand why she was reacting this way. Meanwhile, Hale interrupted their conversation, wondering what they had been talking about for so long. Hale's quick interruption caught both Violet and Winter off guard. They were left to ponder the status of their conversation and the misunderstandings that had grown between them. Winter moved forward, holding Violet in his arms, surprising the onlookers. He told Violet that she should preserve her energy and relax, emphasizing that he knew her body was frail from his own experience with it. Violet, on the other hand, insisted that she still had some fortitude, to which Winter flatly replied that she didn't. Winter carefully placed Violet on the bed and demanded that she stay in her room, which he claimed was the best in the hotel. He stated that he needed to go to the company right away and instructed her to relax as instructed. He then brought up the subject of her body, describing the difficulties he had in transferring her in her weakened state. Violet was taken aback by this news. In bewilderment, she compared the torment she endured as a near-death slave to her current circumstances. She expressed her awe at Winter's capacity to live in his own body. Winter, finding her viewpoint absurd, proposed summoning a doctor and advising Violet to rest down for the time being. Winter advised that Hale call a doctor and gather some women's comfy apparel. He stated that he would go to work after freshening up. Hale expressed surprise at Winter's recent behavior, saying he never anticipated him to do such things. Violet was examined by the doctor when he came. The doctor commented on her bad health and asked if she was taking medicine for a weak heart. Violet confirmed that she had been taking the drug. The doctor informed her that the medication had exacerbated her headaches and advised her to stop using it. The doctor suggested a new drug for her to try. The doctor was surprised by the prescription because the drug is rarely prescribed nowadays. Violet's doctor was not licensed, according to the doctor. Violet burst up laughing and jumped out of bed when she heard the doctor's comment. She expressed relief that her ailment might be cured. She then stated that she had requested to be shifted to a different room and felt compelled to get there before the proprietor of the current room returned. Violet remarked on the foolishness of saying such things to someone who was married. She reflected on their body transfer dilemma and her reluctance to let Winter's fleeting compassion give her misleading hope. At first, she assumed he would treat her the same way he always had. Violet entered her chamber the next morning, surprised to witness a spectacle in front of her. Her room was strewn with new clothes. She wondered why they were there and yelled that they were in her chamber. Violet was greeted by Lulu, a hotel housekeeper, who asked about the breakfast. Lulu then advised that they get Violet ready because they didn't have much time. Violet should dress appropriately for her lunch date with Mr. Winter, she said. Violet, taken aback, replied, "A lunch engagement with my husband?" She paused, holding a dazzling gown in her palms, debating if it was suitable for her to wear such a spectacular attire. Lulu revealed that Mr. Hale bought the garments in a hurry, saying that Violet and Winter hadn't eaten together in a long time. Violet considered the fact that it was their first lunch date and the comments she might receive because she was dressed so extravagantly. Violet recognized in her thoughts that wearing such a dress would irritate the noble families. Violet chose an outfit she would normally wear, one that would not draw much notice. She discarded the flashy gown and indicated her plan to wear something more understated. Lulu commended Violet on her choice of color, saying it suited her nicely. Violet, surprised, stated that she had intended to wear a different outfit. Lulu emphasized that the color was perfect for the weather and asked Violet whether she liked it. Violet hesitated before confessing that the pink clothing was her favorite color, especially since no one was around to judge her. She resolved to wear the dress that day. Violet's choice was praised by Lulu, who asked Violet to sit so she could style her hair. Lulu observed as she dressed Violet's hair that Mr. Violet must be fortunate to have such a charming and attractive wife. Violet acknowledged the sentiment and thanked her. She did, however, express her anxiety about her husband's ability to fund all of the extravagant items. Lulu was caught aback by Violet's harsh comment and wondered why she brought up the subject. Violet claimed that she overheard stories that her husband was on the edge of bankruptcy since he spent $24 million to marry her. Hearing such news surprised Lulu. She remarked that Mr. Violet had always bought clothes like them. Violet was taken aback by this news and wondered whether it was true. Mr. Hale, according to Lulu, regularly brought racks of dresses. Violet found it difficult to believe, stating, "No way." She studied the situation, remembering she had never gotten any gowns from her husband. She wondered who the garments were designed for. Winter, on the other hand, checked his watch and wondered aloud why Violet was taking so long. Hale reassured him that there were still 2 minutes left and that the clothing had been delivered late, so it was natural for her to be late. Winter questioned Hale's unwavering support for Violet since yesterday, and he expressed his frustration at the prospect of wasting so much time on her if she was only going to wear a drab dress. Hale agreed, wondering why Violet usually dressed so simply and modestly. Violet stepped out of the carriage just as it arrived. When Violet arrived, Winter stated cynically that it must be her prized princess taste, which they couldn't even comprehend. Violet approached Winter and suggested they get started. Winter, surprised by her choice of clothes, remarked that he expected her to be dressed in her typical attire. Violet questioned why he assumed that, to which Winter replied that it was because she loved drab clothing. Violet reasoned that it didn't matter what she said because Winter never showed any interest in her. Winter, who was starving, recommended they go inside. They sat down to eat, and Winter commented on how lovely the setting was, remarking that they would have been seated in the dark if they hadn't stopped arguing earlier.